Hello and welcome. This is Martina
Lisette.
and we are Perspectives with
Lisette.
and Martina. Welcome you all. See, I mixed it up. You never quite know sometimes what we're gonna get. I have my little weird routines or rituals I do before I kick it off because I'm normally the one kicking it off. And it's always like the first time. But is it really? That's beside the point. Anyway, welcome. This is our third series. No, it's our third video of our Growing Old in America. There we go. I said third series. No. But yes, before we get into that, again, just want to say welcome to everyone. Thank you for watching the first two videos. If you haven't, I guess you don't have to watch them in order, but
Mm-mm.
we would like for you to watch them. So, it really helps us. Give us some comments. Keep it nice if you want to comment. Give us suggestions. We're always up for interacting with you guys. Give us a thumbs up. It really helps us out. Let us know if you like the content that we're covering because we like the content. So we like to think you all like the content too. But yeah, if you can affirm that with a thumbs up or a comment, we really appreciate that. So yeah, here we are today. Um, let's see. Yeah, we're talking about growing old in America. We're just continuing that conversation. And, generally, like before we get into recording these videos, we always have like some sort of like prep. Seth and I will get together for a bit and kind of just like recap what we did previously and like, what do we want to talk about? And so even though we go off on tangents, we do prep. You know what I'm saying? Okay, we do prep. And so, really, I think we can just dive right into it, honestly. And so, Seth, what do you want to say? Let's just get into it.
Yeah, so as you were talking, Martina, and mentioning, we typically will have a little brainstorming session of where we want to go and what we want to tie in. Uh, and one of the things that both of us have been going through recently in our families is having our parents interacting quite a bit with our healthcare system here in the US. Uh,
Mhm.
so today we are going to look at through the lens with growing old in America, through the lens of healthcare and what that kind of means as you get older in
Mhm.
America, and what you may or may not have access to, what you may or may not have knowledge about. And we're also like, I was telling Martina, I was like, it'd be great for us to share uh how we're growing old in America through the lens of healthcare. Like, what has
Yeah.
been our experiences in healthcare? If you have been watching and following us for a bit, you know that we've talked about healthcare quite a bit on our channel.
Mhm.
We've talked about it through looking through the lens of white supremacy and its impact in the healthcare system and things like that. We've talked about it through um, our experiences as to plus size women, and then sort of what that encompasses with healthcare. And now I think we're gonna dive into more of like what has been sort of that experience, especially as, at least for me, I'm getting into I'm in my late 30s, going into my 40s, and the healthcare system uh, becomes something that you kind of interact with more as you get older, and things
That's
like
it.
that. But like I was, it was telling you, Martina, I was like thinking back of like, what were my 20s like with healthcare, and and even thinking now still in my 30s, what has that been and what that experience is. And who knows how long we'll be doing this, podcast where we might be able to talk about our 40s and 50s, and and
Sexy.
kind of continue this. Yeah. And then so it's just, it's something that we wanted to explore, and kind of share, what we have seen as, two daughters who are watching their parents navigate I would say a very complicated, not very friendly healthcare system in our country. If you don't have the means to afford it,
Exactly.
like it is a very cold and harsh world.
Hmm.
And the more and more that my parents interact with it, the more and more I interact with it. it becomes just so clear on just how cold it is when you don't have money. I'm like, that's it. Like when you don't have the money to
Yep.
afford things. Like, and I know, Martina, you might share some of your experience on that, but I think that's really what today episode is going to be about. And we're gonna aim to keep it, under 45 minutes. We're gonna aim for that, but hopefully we can. Because if you also been following, sometimes we could go for an hour or change, but we're gonna try. If we don't finish it today in this with this episode, we're gonna come back. We're gonna
Yeah.
circle back to this and do a part two to this episode. But any just thoughts of where we should start, Martina? Like, I don't even. It's
I guess,
so
you're talking, which, both of us, as we, say that we are, daughters who are taking care of our parents. And, you know, when you don't have money, I think it impacts everything. But I think healthcare, obviously, is such a debate in this country anyway, as like,
Mhm,
should healthcare be funded by the federal government, which in turn comes out in taxpayers' monies, or people still like, oh, that's on you if you get sick. I mean, honestly, obviously, people who watch this know us, that we think that we should have universal health care and everyone should get the same treatment, regardless of where you come from or who you know, how much money, whatever resources you have. Um, and so, I preface that, to go into this conversation, because I talk about my dad sometime on here often, because he is, between him and my mom, my dad is often the one. He he is older. He is 11 years older than my mom. And so they have that gap between him. And so he's typically been the one that's been, more ill, even I would say throughout my life. Like my dad, because since I
mhm,
was born, he's had some sort of medical issues off and on. And as he's gotten older, it's just intensified. The recently, my mother, bless her heart, she actually ended up very ill earlier this year. So we are recording this actually the first day of May. Um, and my mother got sick way back in February. So it's been a while, and she's obviously at this point she is recuperating and things are starting to look up. But throughout that process, um, it like going back to what Lisette said, people are very snarky. And these people who work in the industry, and I'm always one, and again, we have talked about this too. I think healthcare, particularly if you're like front facing or frontline staff or providers, this is really an industry or a business sector, whatever you want to call it, that you should only be in if you love it. Because if you
mhm,
don't, I think to me, bedside manners are so important,
yeah.
particularly when people are sick, because they just don't have time for a lot of shit. They're just like, I don't want to be here. I don't feel well. I just want to get better. And so I think, oftentimes that is not always the case. And maybe somewhere along the line, people did enjoy what they did, but maybe they get burnt out, or they need a break. I don't know what it is, but I always think healthcare is such a, I'm going to say business, because it is a business, as we've talked about on here. Unfortunately, it is a business, but it is a business to me that requires a lot of patience and compassion. It to me, in order, if you're going to do it right, if in order to have those two, I guess, personality traits, to me is a big part of being successful as a healthcare provider. And so my mother, again, she was very ill. She actually ended up having to have like life saving surgery on her stomach. She actually had her oh gosh, her gallbladder ruptured. And
Mm,
so she was very ill, had to have emergency surgery. And I think at this point, my mother, because she stayed in the hospital over a month. So I think at this point, we probably were pushing towards the end of February, early March, when this ended up happening to her. Um, and so she stayed in the hospital. And, I will say, like, as we're talking about people who are, are compassionate and good at what they do, the nurses, I will say, before I bash people, the nurses, I will say, and I have a number of friends who are nurses. It does make a difference. And her nurses there. And my mom, she's in her early 60s and she's getting to that old lady stage where she's stuck in her ways. Hell, I'm stuck in my ways and I'm not close to 60 at all. And, there would be times when she's just real picky about certain stuff. And so, because she really couldn't get out of the bed all that often, I
Yeah.
think particularly after the surgery, she was on some physical therapy, but, I felt like every hour she wanted to be set up in the bed because she would slide down the bed.
Mhm.
That's just something she's like, I don't want my feet touching the edge of the bed. So bless these nurses' heart. They would come in here and every time they would they would push her up so that way her feet would not be dangling off the bed. And
Yeah.
just really just like an example of something.
Oh,
But the nurses were so sweet. Um, and by the time she was discharged, the nurses were saying that, my mother is why they are in the business of nursing. Like she is
mm,
why they decide to do what they do. They were like, she was so like manable. She was like, yes, ma'am, no, sir. And, she was very sweet. She's saying please and thank you. And they were, and so there was like, so that is always kind of heartfelt to hear, especially given with how ill that she was.
yeah.
And so to back up a bit, so before she got discharged, that's where the debacle came in.
You remember?
So my mother is on state assistance, and boy, again, so she lives in Mississippi, but has to end up going to Alabama just because of the type of procedure that like initially led her there, and just because the hospital equipment and whatnot, she had to end up going over to Alabama. And so that was already a thing. And so basically, I remember it was, I was actually down there visiting, and it may have been the day I was getting ready to fly back to Chicago that the doctor, I don't think it was the surgeon, but it was her doctor, it was the attending there, was basically saying like, oh, well, everything is looking good and she's like free to go. Which is awesome. You want,
Yeah.
you don't want to stay in the hot, once if you're ill, I mean, if you're fit to leave, like you want to
Yeah.
leave. However, the situation is with my mother's insurance, she doesn't have inpatient rehabilitation, which would have been the preference.
Mm,
So she was released onto the family, which okay, was fine. But I had already started speaking with the social worker, caseworker, however they refer to themselves. I had asked them, because she's out of state, could they start to help me find places? Because I knew that she wasn't going to be able to transfer into inpatient rehab. So I had started
mhm.
those conversations with them early to see if they could help me. So by the end of that, by the time we got to this day, I had already spoken to a social worker, case manager twice. Nobody had ever gotten back to me. And so that day when the doctor said that, oh, it took me so much off guard because that's exactly what I didn't want to happen. I had started those conversations because I
Mhm.
didn't want it to be last minute trying to get my mother home, which is just me and my brother, are able to be able to care for her. And so both him and I work full time. He's working in the other state. And so even though she was in Mobile, Alabama. So she's not far from home, but it's 2 hours away. So that's 4 hours a day if you're driving there and back. And I was,
Mhm.
like I said, I'm all the way in Chicago. So it was a whole thing is where we were like, we're not set up yet. We want to make sure that we have the house, set up for her to come home. And the doctor made it seem like, oh, well, we don't want this to be a stressful thing. This is just starting a conversation. While I'm at the airport, I get a call from my brother. And he's like, why did he call and say to come pick up mom? I said, no, see, I just talked to the doctor about this. I told him the situation and he made it seem like it was okay. Now, I guess a part of this could have been on me because we know doctors, I'm not trying to be disrespectful because there's a number of doctors I love, but they just come in and out,
Yeah.
and due to our sucky healthcare system and the way insurance is set up, they really just, they're about 5-10 minutes, peace. They out. They off on to the
Yeah.
next.
True.
They don't know what's happening behind the scenes. They don't know the administrative part. And I'm not saying that they don't care, but that's not their focus. So
Yeah.
that's one thing. But my brother, I can't remember who he was speaking with on the phone. But anyway, they was like, come get mom. She's been discharged. And he's like, I can't come today because he was actually still at work. And he's like, I don't get home at like 8 or 9 o'clock tonight. And they were like, oh, like we can have her come home by ambulance. Like it's fine. He's like, but I'm not set up for her to come home just yet. Like I didn't know this is so last minute. And again, not that we don't want her home because we do, but I had started this process earlier. So we didn't feel rushed. And my mother felt like she was being pushed out of the hospital. And so anyway, fast forward to that next day, my mother's still there at the hospital. I was technically had made it back to Chicago and I was off that day, brother's working. And so I really was back and forth with the hospital admin people all day. And I remember that morning that they were like, well, she is discharged. And I was like, okay, so we're trying to work out everything on this end. I was like, can she, stay in her hospital room at that time? Because technically she was discharged. And so the woman on the other end of the phone, again, I don't know if it was a nurse or a case manager, she was like, well, technically she's discharged. So we generally just, put her in a stretcher and leave her in the acute care department. So I was like, my mother just had major surgery, like life saving surgery, where she was unresponsive for a time. So you're telling me that you're just going to put her in a stretcher and leave her to wait somewhere until somebody can come take her home? And I was like, I got to talk to somebody else. I think I ended up talking to that person's manager, whatnot. But anyway, she was able to stay in her room because I was like, that's real cold. This is, I mean, granted, my mother was not treated that way, but you telling me, hey, this is what y'all do when somebody is discharged? You put them out on a stretcher and just basically, because my mother wouldn't have gotten any care, she wouldn't have gotten any medication. She just would have been there in this
Yeah.
area. Um, and so ended up, it was, we finally did get her home, but it has been hell and high water trying to get even her care team or her doctors that she had previously before she got sick like this to even accommodate her in a sense to do like a telemed visit. Because last time she was at the doctor, and my mother, she does have pre-existing conditions, so she goes to the doctor frequently enough.
Yeah.
And so last time she had been was in January. And so we fast forward, this was like March, fairly recently. Nobody wanted to do telemed. I was explaining the situation. Like my mother literally, because she had been in a bed over a month and her insurance doesn't cover inpatient rehab,
Yeah.
she can't come in right now. And so I don't know what part of that they were not understanding. Even like when it came down to writing prescriptions, they were like, well, we need to see her in the office, but she can't come in. That's what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Like she can't get out of the bed. Like
Mhm.
I'm not lying. I mean, there is more to it to that, but I have said a lot. Let's say I'll let you
No, I think it's it's frustrating at the end of the day. Um, because you know that you mentioned like the doctors being like, sure, she could stay here. The doctors typically don't know all of
go.
what
Mm-hmm.
insurance covers, doesn't cover, all of the administrative red tape that comes along with being a patient in a hospital setting or in a healthcare uh, uh, organization. And that's the frustrating part as a, as either a person who's receiving care or someone that is advocating for someone
Mm-hmm.
to receive care, because you're like, who who can really help me? Like, who has the answers? And why isn't that there is a like standard of care that you can just depend on? But because you have multiple insurance companies, you have different sort of policies, different levels of insurance, of like what gets covered, what doesn't get covered. If you got plan silver, you're not going to get covered, but if you have, the gold
The goals.
standard plan, like, like platinum, like like all these things, and then you have your PPO, your HMO, your EPO, like all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
And all you want is for the person that needs the care to get the care that they need in the time that they deserve it, and the support to transition out of the healthcare setting. And it is frustrating because you don't see that. You rarely see it. Like I remember sharing a bit ago on, I don't remember what series or episode we were talking about, just my dad had gotten um it's sick and all these things, and he had been in the hospital, and they were like, you his insurance doesn't cover this. He needs to go, but he needs to be in a nursing home so that he can have rehab and all
Ah,
these things and all
yeah.
this. And I'm like, okay, I'm like, but they're like, but he needs to stay in the hospital for a certain amount of time before the insurance will kick in because he has Medicare. So there's all these things, and I'm like, how am I? And how is he supposed to know all of that? Like,
Exactly.
I'm like, how is this even real life when you are like, you need to stay in the hospital 3 days before your Medicare kicks in to cover whatever? And I'm like, can you imagine? Like, because I remember them like, they're like, they're like, technically he could be discharged at any point in time. And I'm like, if you do that, there's no coverage on anything,
Right. Then what are you
and I'm
supposed
like,
to do?
so it becomes this sort of like, again, you go back to like, you realize very quickly how much health in the United States is a industry. It's
Yeah.
a that's all it is. Like, even if you want to take care of yourself and become healthier,
Hmm.
we've talked about this. Like, if you don't have the money to afford the healthier options, like, your health will most likely suffer. And
Shit out of luck.
and exactly. And it doesn't get any better as you get older, again, unless you have the financial means to
Hmm.
have the platinum version of whatever it could be, or you have the ability to pay out of pocket, right? Because if you can pay out of pocket, nothing matters. Like,
You don't.
whatever,
Nope.
go through it, use your insurance, don't use your insurance, get
Whatever.
the rehab that you need to get the nurse is going to come into your home, like all of that, because you have the means to cover the cost of it.
Yes.
And you and I, we currently don't have the means to cover that for our
Not
parents,
for a
but
long time, which I had to do for my mom. Like, but it couldn't. Like, we can't. I can't do it anymore because I can't. I can't afford to pay for the caregiver
it's
and the nurse to come to the house.
so it's this and that's it goes back to just this frustrating feeling because you're like, I have done everything that I can do or that I thought I was supposed to do, but these safety nets, or these systems and protocols are supposed to be in place to help you as a patient, you as an individual, and support you to get better. They get broken down the moment that they realize that your insurance isn't going to cover, that the hospital isn't going to get any money out of you,
Hmm.
and you're just completely written off,
Yeah.
right? Like, because I have seen and heard, people who are like, there's the safety net hospitals, right? Those
Yeah.
that are gonna take you in and help you as much as they can because they're a safety net hospital. That's what they're there for. They're
Hmm.
meant to catch those that fall through the cracks and all that. But the fact that we have to have safety net hospitals to begin with always has that pretty wrong with me because I'm like, you should be able to go to any hospital and get the care and not worry about how you're going to pay for it, how you're going to not be bankrupt at the end of whatever treatment. Like, we haven't even gotten
Yeah.
into the conversation of getting a long-term illness, right? Getting something like cancer and
Yeah. Chronic
and
illness.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
chronic, like these things that are going to have implications not just in the immediate but in the long term, and what that means, and all of that. And it's just, to me, just becomes very frustrating because I think about myself, and I think about the journey that we both have been on, the last year and change now, um and how much I've had to interact more with healthcare. Like, we've talked about, like, getting our medication and how hard that has
Oh my
been,
God. Yes.
and all those things. But to realize that that's a fight that you're always going to have to fight, like, you will always have to advocate for just getting what you need, and it's basic things, right? It's your medication, it's your care. Like I went to the doctor actually today. I had a follow-up appointment just for medication, and I was like, oh, I wanted to ask about something, and they're like, we can't do that in this appointment. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, he's like, you're gonna have to schedule a follow-up appointment because of insurance. Because if we talk about this right now and we come up with whatever plan, whatever,
Yeah.
your insurance could potentially not cover anything. And then we get into this whole thing like we might not get paid and then you'll have to pay out of pocket. I was like, wait. So
Simple question. Just a question.
I was like, I just want to know my options. And they're like, still like if we because we have to bill and the code whatever all this thing, they're like, you run the risk of and I was like, so you mean I have to make another appointment, come back at a different time, so inconvenience myself again just to have the conversation and not even, get what I might need or you might because then I would have to then do a follow-up appointment because I might have to weigh my options or whatever. And then like I was mad this morning
I would be
because I
pissed
was
off too. Yeah.
I'm like, I'm right here. Like, it is convenient. Like, I'm right here. I was, and they were like, it's just because, and I'm like, again, the frustration of having to just, and I was like, then I was, they were like, well, you have an appointment in 4 weeks. I was like, can I then just wait until the 4 weeks and I have that conversation in 4 weeks? They're like, yeah, you can. And I was like, fine. I'm not going to inconvenience, but
I'll
I'm
make
already
another, yeah,
inconveniencing.
appointment.
But it was just this frustrating thing and that's probably what triggered me to go down this rabbit hole today because I was like I will this is going to be a fight every time with
Yeah.
our current healthcare system. Like this is how it's going to be. I won't get the care that I'm looking for because insurance might not cover it because it's coded under a certain thing and you're having a conversation. And I think it was like, well, you came in for a sick appointment. So we can't, if it's not related to what you came in for, then we can't. I was like, I don't forget
Fuck
it.
it.
Like, I was
Fuck it.
like,
I know, just I'm not doing it.
it was just this like moment of like, I wasn't getting mad at the nurse practitioner because that's who I was seeing today.
Right.
I was like, I'm like, I don't want to get mad at them because it's not their fault. Like, they're
Yeah.
just operating within this system. Like, they're
Yes.
just doing what they know. And they're trying to protect me and my money. Like,
That is, yes, the way to look at it. Yes.
I was,
Hadn't thought about
like,
that.
hey, like,
Yeah.
because if you ever got in a statement of like what it costs to just see your doctor,
Yes. When you look at that and then you see what you actually pay, and it's like all these
eh,
hundreds and thousands of
yeah.
dollars that have been covered. Oh my gosh.
So I get it. I understand why, but it's the mere fact that it has to happen because you have this we have a capitalistic healthcare system.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's out to make money, it's out to do it, and it makes growing old just expensive and scary and confusing because I mean, it's facts that as you get older, you're going to have to need the healthcare
Yeah.
system more and more.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just, well, yeah, I mean, it's just
Well,
frustrating. Like that's the only way I can describe it, and maddening, like maddening and frustrating,
sickening. That's
sickening.
another,
That's another good one.
sickening. I've been using, that's been my word of today. Sickening. I shouldn't have to use it because it's sickening. But it's always, there's so many different pockets of stuff that you had touched on here. But gosh, it's going back to this safety net hospitals
Mm,
though. And it got me thinking, bless these hospitals heart, because we know a number of them.
yes.
And they most of the time are generally not the hospitals that people want to go to because you
Yeah.
have to wait four scores and seven before you get
Yeah.
seen. Um, but I will say they have a lot of dedicated people that
They
work at
do.
safety net. They
Yeah.
really do. Because I will say, I feel again, like I said, the healthcare industry, especially if you're front facing, you're a direct provider, those your manners are so important. And
Yeah.
your heart, I think, really has to be in, especially to work at a safety net hospital. And I always say, if you don't have a heart, or you're not in it, then you need to go work for these big medical centers, which is horrible to say. But I really think, in particular, for safety net hospitals, people are coming there because they don't have any other result. Like, they have no other option.
Yeah.
They can't go anywhere else. Nobody else will want to see them, because the first question or the second question out of the admin's mouth is going to be, what sort of insurance do you have?
Yeah.
That is the question. And for I say this for my dad, who oftentimes I'm over a lot of his healthcare. Begin because, like, as I said, he's often been the one that's been more sick than my mom, and so I deal with most of his healthcare stuff, like prescriptions and appointments and stuff like that. And when he has to go to the emergency room, or even just for a doctor's appointment visit, but I think particularly when he has had to go to the ER, I will get a phone call from admin because they want to know his insurance information, because he don't know it. I know it.
Yeah.
So they're calling me
Yeah.
because they have to get the information. And my dad, pretty much, he, has state and federal assistance, but he can pretty much be sick all day, every day, and they will take his insurance anywhere. So that is, I will say, a benefit for him. He's
Yeah.
covered pretty much every way, but they want to know his insurance. I need that.
Yeah.
I need that information. And so, and it just got me thinking how I wish we didn't need safety, like you're saying, like that we didn't actually need safety net hospitals, and the fact that we do need them, I wish we had. Either I wish we didn't need them, or we had more of them, because I think,
Yeah.
obviously, the people who are often the people who need it are the ones, sometimes even safety net hospitals can only do so much,
Yeah.
because they're depending on state funding or federal funding. And that goes right back to the circle that we know that, depending on the administration, or even when we have the administration you may want, whatever that may be, um,
Yeah.
I always feel that healthcare, even though it's such a polarizing issue, it just often doesn't get the care that it wants right now, or the care
Mhm.
that it needs in this country, as we have spoken about.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think. Gosh, you said so much. So many things were popping in my head, and now I've lost this mind. I gotta. That's when that, as we talk about getting old, my memory loss as I get older. It's
Real.
real. And I'm itching towards my late 30s. I'm not there yet, but I'm itching towards it. And my memory loss is so real. And I really, because you brought up so many good points. And gosh, I'm trying to remember what you had said, but I know that safety net one is one that
Mm.
I had particularly wanted to talk about. And you also, yeah, you talked about I brought it up first about the doctors. They don't know the admin stuff. They only know they went to medical school. That's what they
Yeah.
know. And you're talking about going to your appointment as well with, like, the nurse practitioner. Um, to me, I think, it was great that she actually told you that and gave you the heads up. And I think, going back to talking about those people who work in the industry, work in the healthcare industry, who are directly there working with patients, um, and they can't always do everything. So I'm thinking back to when my mom, when I was talking about the caseworker, social worker there, I understand. So because she's coming out of state, it makes things a bit more difficult. I
Mm.
understand that. There's only so much that you can do, because she's out of state. And that part I was understanding. But to me, it was really, the people I was dealing with just seemed like they didn't even want to be helping. Like, they didn't even want to help. Like, they didn't even want to talk about it. And I remember when my mom was discharged, and I was looking for outpatient rehab places in our
Mhm.
hometown in Mississippi. Or I wanted to know more about it, because I, again, I had wanted to be prepared for this. I had asked one of the ladies there, I was like, well, do you have any suggestions? Would you help me make phone calls? Because that's a part of their job. And
Mhm.
she's like, well, she's like, since she's out of state, it would just be like going on Google. I mean, I can do that for you. She just seemed like she didn't even want to be bothered. Hmm? And
Mm.
that had just really kind of pissed me off. I said, you know what? That's okay. Because I don't trust you now at this point anyway. And obviously,
Yeah.
this is my mother. So I love and care for her. So I'm like, if it's just Google, I'll do that myself. I don't need you. But it was kind of the whole attitude thing. And, like I said, I understand you only can do what's within your means, but how you deliver that information makes a big difference. And that's, I think, where some of the frustration with me was, is that I felt like people just, they just like, some of them just didn't even really want to be there. They didn't want to talk about it. I don't want to work sometimes. Lisette
Yeah.
knows probably most of the time. But I have to work, okay? I have bills to pay. Obviously, I help take care of my mom and dad. So I have to work, you know? So I know that. And so I try not to go into the workplace with an attitude for people who haven't done anything to me. They just, I was on the other side and I'm just trying to figure out a situation for my mother. And you come over here, things are already difficult enough at that time that it was very stressful and you seem like you didn't even want to help. So I don't even want to deal with you. I just do it myself. And so that was like kind of when you mentioned that about the nurse practitioner, it seemed like she was a bit more empathetic. She was
Yeah.
trying to look out for you in the instance where she just was basically like, well, I can't do anything for you, you got to figure that out yourself. She was more helpful, even though it was like frustrating for you.
Yeah.
She was just really trying to look out for you, and look out for the business too, but look out for you and financially and whatnot. Which again, it really makes a difference in the type of attitude that the person has. And I think brought me to another story. Okay, I'm gonna intersect this story. Not quite a tangent, but recently,
Hey, it's okay.
recently, my PCP, who I love my PCP, she's been my PCP probably since my second, third year here in Chicago. And I met her through a mutual friend of mine, and we both have her as a
Nice.
PCP. She's awesome. And recently, the she had worked for like she had been in the same location since I have been seeing her. And a few years back, they switched to a different corporate brand, and like they were bought out by another
Okay.
healthcare organization. And so they switched to a different name because she wasn't in the practice alone. It was her with like 5 or 6 other doctors in there. And so with that switch came so many different changes, where you were talking about being, you could not, what you come for, like what you make the appointment for is what you have to be seen for. You can't do anything
Yeah.
outside of that. And so that's how the business became once they switched to this new healthcare group who bought them out. And so fast forward, now this healthcare group is closing their Chicago office, which I was very sad because I was like, I love my doctor. And so I remember having my last appointment with her before the office closed. And she was telling me that she is going to be back in business, like she's going to be here at her own private practice. But
Mhm.
one thing that she was looking forward to again is being able to spend time with her patients. Because when she was under this old,
Yeah.
I'll say, regime, this old
Yeah.
regime, she said she had to be so, she'd be quick in and out, like no more than 10 minutes. And I honestly had never picked up. Well, obviously I did. I know that she was be in and out, but it wasn't until she actually had spoken to me about it and said that's what she was looking forward to, being able to spend an adequate amount of time with her patients that
Yeah.
she had not had the chance to do the last few years. And I was like, this is why I love you. This is why I love you. That's the story I wanted to say because I just think it's such a um again, it's the insurance, that's set up that way, that doctors have to push patients out, like push them out. They can't spend adequate amount of time with them. And so it was just very refreshing to hear that that's what she was looking forward to most. And that, even though the offices were closing, she was okay with it. And she's gonna, be starting her own practice again. And I was just like, see, this is why I know you're a good doctor. She's just been really good. And I know we have spoken about how, because we are plus size and how we've been
Yeah.
treated by different doctors, I've never had that experience with her. She has always treated me with kindness, and I can laugh with her, I can talk with her, we have a good time. And so I'm very much looking forward to seeing her. Not that I want to be sick, but when I get sick, I know
Yeah.
now she won't be rushing me. And now I can talk to her. We can talk for 15, 20 minutes and just talk and have a regular
Yeah.
conversation again, which so many doctors, they can't do because of insurance.
Yeah.
Insurance wants you to get as many patients as you can in a day so they can make as much money as they can.
Yeah. Yeah. It's again, we go back to just the conversations we've had in the past about, you know, healthcare being a business.
Yeah.
It's run, by, insurance standards. It's run by, what what is the healthcare organization going to be reimbursed for, and how, for how many patients. And you get into the conversation of reimbursements within. I know, Martina, you probably know a lot about that when it comes to Medicare, Medicaid, and all of that, and what gets, some reimbursements and all of that. And even through my line of work, come across that and have those conversations.
Yeah.
And I think like today's conversation really kind of pointed out to me just how much insurance drives how we grow old in America, as far as healthcare is
Yeah.
concerned. Like, I'm amazed at how many times we talked about insurance, and
Right.
like the impact it's had on the resources we've been able to get, on like how much help we're able to get, what gets, all of that. So it's like, I think it'd be really interesting to kind of delve in the future more into insurance, and the implications it has, and you know the benefits versus the impact, or whatever it
Hmm.
could be. But I'm just sitting here, and I was, as you were talking about your doctor, your PCP, and
Yeah.
how, she feels it's going to be much better now that she'll be in her private practice. Of course, she's still going to go through insurance and all of that, and things like
Oh
that, but
yeah.
she won't have this, um, outline, this outlier of a company
Hmm.
dictating how she decides to provide care,
Right.
and she'll get to make that decision. And it's terrible how many doctors and nurses, and and medical assistants, all of these, they might want to help you, they might want to give you those extra 5 minutes, those extra, whatever, 10 minutes, or have that conversation with
Yeah.
you because they know that you're here, we can have the conversation. But they can't, because they know that it's going to either um cut into their time, their money, other patients as well, because they've already scheduled out their patients.
Yep. Yep.
Um so it's just interesting how much all of that, when, as we were talking, and as we were, as you were sharing, and as I was kind of sharing, and just kind of brought all these things to my mind, of like the impact that healthcare has in us growing old, and what we choose to access. Because at some point we decide, does the does my health benefit from me having to go wait these lines, go through all this hassle,
Mm.
or do I just put up with whatever ailment I'm going through, and pray to God that everything's gonna be fine, that I'll be okay, because I don't want to deal with that system. I don't want to deal with having to, figure out if I can afford it, if I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
spend a day at the doctor, at the hospital, or I'll have to go to multiple appointments, which means I'm gonna have to take multiple time off. And the moment you tell me whatever my diagnosis is, if I can ignore it and avoid it, and just keep going until all that, a lot of people choose that, because
Yeah.
we know that the moment we get into an appointment and it becomes a reality, and it has a name to whatever we might be sick with or might be happening, we are going to get into a spider web of just debt and time, and not just money debt, time debt, like
You
time
can't
you're
get that
not going to
back.
get back, because
Can't get back.
your work, like all these things you gotta think about. And it doesn't surprise me when, I hear, doctors and healthcare professionals say, like, there's people who just don't want to come to the doctor. I was like, because you know how much time it takes to get to your doctor, and then you're waiting, and then you're only seen for 10-15 minutes, but you've
All
spent
that
two
time. Yeah.
hours of your day. Like, I was like, it takes me, I mean, just it took, most of my morning. I had to leave my house at 6:30. My
Hmm.
appointment was at, 8. I was able to get in early because I knew maybe if I get there early, they might see me quicker. So, I get it, but it's time that we're not getting back. It's just time to just, so I'm like,
Yeah.
there's all these things, and it's like, and I know the conversation that people are having of like, can you access your healthcare in your community? It'd be great. I mean, I know there's some great community health centers and all these things, but they're overrun, right? Like
Mhm.
they are busy. They are, they don't have, the appointments same days, and it's in like when you're sick, and you just want to be
Exactly.
seen right
Right.
away. So it becomes this whole conversation of like the decisions that, our parents made
Mhm.
for their health, for their health, solely because they don't want to spend time at the doctor. Like I've had, one of my parents be like, just cancel the appointment because if you they're like if you scheduled it at, I think it was like at 11 or something, that's too
Mhm.
late. I'm gonna be there for like 3-4 hours. Like, and they know this.
I
Like
like to
that's
go early.
they're like, and they know this. But I'm like, but that's the only time they gave me. Like, there's nothing else
Yes.
until like 4 weeks. Like, I was
Exactly.
like, it's either this or we wait another month. So it just, again, it doesn't become easier
Mm-mm.
to
No.
access health care. It doesn't become less time consuming as you get older. And it just, again, it impacts our health. And I'm gonna go back and question some of, healthcare professionals I know, because I'm like, I'm gonna need to have a conversation about this, because it's um
Yes.
it's just, interesting, because I hear people be like, people don't want to come to the doctor. I was like, yeah, because there's so much you have to invest as the patient to just go to the doctor for what, 15 minutes of your time, and then I'm thrown back to the nurse, and or
That's
like scheduling a follow-up appointment for, 4 weeks to see, whatever. And it's, you know that's it. I got nothing more, Martina.
that's
I'll
a,
throw it back to you when you
that's
close
enough.
out.
I know we're getting close to because we said we're gonna try to keep this at 45 minutes.
Yeah,
We do the best we can.
yeah,
Um, but I hadn't thought about it. Gosh, when you were saying how the investment um in
yeah. the
that.
the the time, the debt you get into.
Yeah, yeah, like thought of it from that perspective. Because it is true when I think about, my mom, even for her PCP, that's like it's over an hour away.
Yeah,
And like she can't drive herself. I mean, she can drive, but like my brother, like God bless my brother. He's a saint. He has been really, I mean, he's always kind of been there because like I'm the one here with dad and he's there with mom. But now since mom has been sick, it's been a bit of both him and I. And I've been flying back and forth from Chicago to
yeah,
Mississippi. But my brother's a saint. He's really been kind of really carrying it a lot and still trying to work. But he, like, before she got this ill, he would have to like take off of work or take off half a day and drive mama
yeah.
an hour to do
Mhm.
like 10 or 15 minutes. Then if she has any sort of prescriptions of medicine, got to have, you got to go to the pharmacy. You might have to wait, pick that up. And that, that kills the day. So he pretty much ended up just taking the day off. Um, and I think also you were talking about how, I guess people, the physicians or whatnot, or people in the industry say like, why don't people want to go to the doctor? And it's so true. I think it's not necessarily people don't want to go, but the resources it takes to get there. They
Yep.
don't have the money. You may not have a car. You might have to take public transportation. Hell, you may not even have a way to take public transportation. We know people live in areas that are rural, or even if they're not rural,
Yep.
you can live right here in Chicago and not have a way to get to
Uh-huh.
the doctor. You don't have to live 20 miles away from a major city. Um, but that is so important, and I think that's often something maybe people don't talk about as much as that the resources it takes for just regular folk to go to the doctor or to be cared for. And you
Yeah.
and as you're talking, I was thinking we have better insurance than our parents. We have a
Yeah.
better setup with our insurance than they do, and honestly, that is probably why I go to the doctor because I have insurance through my
Yeah.
company through work as you do, and that's why I often go because like I'm paying for it. I'm paying something each month
Yeah.
to have this coverage. So I tend to use it. So I think for me and for you, we even find it difficult. And we have
Yes.
full coverage in many ways.
Yeah.
Um And just thinking about, our parents who often don't, or other people who don't. And, I know we were talking about our wellness journey, but a friend of mine, she's also taking Ozempic, and she has to pay out of pocket, and she has a pretty good job, but her
Mm,
insurance doesn't cover it. She has to pay out of pocket for it, and that to me is very interesting that she's in the
yeah,
profession she's in and she has to pay. I can't remember how much it is, but it's a few $100s, she has to go
yeah.
and, she's paying for this. And so it's just really kind of even though there are different pockets and different ways people are handling this, it's almost like if you're not just a super wealthy, because I think we have pretty good jobs. I would say we do have pretty good jobs, and my friend
Yeah.
as well. We have pretty good jobs, but we're not wealthy. Hell, I ain't even a thousandaire. We ain't even that. I'm not a thousandaire. Um,
Yeah,
and we
no,
have a tough
at
time,
all.
you know. And yeah,
Yeah.
not at all. And it's just the fact that like our parents have such a difficult time, and like we still can have a difficult time. So to think about it, to take ourselves out of it, and even, with as difficult as it's been caring for my mom because of the system that we live in, I'm sure if she didn't have my brother or I, there are people out there who don't even have anyone to help see about
Yep.
them.
Yep.
Um, and
Yep.
that's something you got to consider, So it's just, um, it's almost like, you don't want to get sick in this country. And, I think something we also haven't talked about is that at the same time, America, when I think of other countries who are obviously not like the Western European countries or like Canada who
Mm,
have universal health care, there are
yeah.
countries out there who health cares are worse than ours. And for
Yeah.
me, that's often so kind of like, because I know at the same time I'm privileged because things
Mhm.
could be worse. They can always be worse. I can live in some developing country where, I may not even have any sort of resources. So it's very
Yeah.
interesting that, and I think about how shitty it is here. It can be better, but it can also be worse. And that's where I'm gonna leave us because I know we are at time probably.
I got to go back to something you talked about because it's in my head. You mentioned the from the caregiver perspective and the time that a
Hmm.
caregiver or caretaker has to invest. And I hadn't thought about that as someone who has to sometimes go pick up the
Right,
prescriptions and or take the parents, and I divide that with my sister, and she comes from far, she's out in Barrington and coming
right.
into the city, and the time that we invest in it. Like, I know I hate going for the prescriptions because it's at the health center's pharmacy, and depending on the day that I have to go and the time, I could be there like 40 minutes waiting,
Hmm.
and then it's another 40 minutes to get home. It took me 30 minutes to get there. That's like
That's
two
eating into
hours or
your
what?
day.
I gotta count.
Yeah.
Like, so I think to your point of like, your brother taking time off, or like or being forced to have to then, take the time off, and if you don't have the flexibility as a caretaker, caregiver, like there's so much more for us to explore. I absolutely just appreciated this conversation because I think it just opened up so many ways that we can continue talking about what it means to grow old in America, and the
Yeah.
different sort of avenues and the different systems that just impact, our future. Like you and I, like this is our future. Like this is where we're going. Like if
Amen.
things
Yeah.
don't change, right? If they continue to be the way that they are, we're going to experience this most likely the same things our parents did. We might have a better shot at getting, depending on where our careers go and where
Yeah.
we end up, if we end up the multimillionaires that could be, like, that may be different. But if we just continue the same trajectory and
Hmm.
and sort of just live okay, like we may suffer the same kind of thing, and a lot of people will, like a lot of us will end up
Yeah.
just, because you know what, Medicare is that equalizer, right? Like Medicare is gonna equalize you. You're gonna have, like we're all gonna fall into Medicare because you gotta enroll in it
Yep.
and all that stuff. Like, it's what you have more of, in addition to Medicare that
Hmm.
matters, and I didn't realize how much it mattered until we got my parents that additional supplemental insurance that you can get, beyond just Medicare. And, you pay out of pocket for that. So you're paying into it. But the amount of times that they're like, oh, they're just on Medicare. And I'm like, oh no, here's their other card. And just the difference it made, because they're like, oh my goodness, good, because it'll cover more, like, and just how relieved even
Hmm.
the administrative person is taking all that they feel, because they're like, okay, now we
To say
can
the
get, if it's something
um,
serious, we can get, like, and it's just fascinating to just kind of think back and, people's faces when you give that extra card, and they're like, oh thank God, like it's just this relief of
I can
like,
feel that.
okay, we yeah. So anyway, I think we're at a good spot to kind of uh pause this conversation. I think it's going to generate for Martina and I many more ideas to kind of continue this conversation, and, and sort of weaving in more into the nuances of what it means to grow old in America. I think we started
Yeah.
this series just thinking that we'd be talking about our parents and their experience and what we've experienced as, their caretaker caregivers. But now it's just sort of blown into a little bit more of like, oh, there's a wide landscape of what impacts
So wide.
not just us,
Hmm.
but even younger generations too. Like, how are they going to, navigate growing old? And there's so much more. I mean, we've
You know, the
we've
Gen
just touched
Zs ain't really
healthcare. There's
putting up with shit though. They ain't really putting up with much.
but I mean, the thing is, the system hasn't changed. So like,
That's true.
you
I
know,
don't. I don't know what they're gonna do to change it, but God bless them, honey.
but again, like, there's just so many other systems that impact how we grow old in America. We touched on a little bit of education, and that's another avenue. So if you, watcher, listener, have any thoughts, any ideas, or just comment, anything that really resonated with you, please,
Yeah.
comment. Um, Either on the video if you're watching, if you are listening, follow us on, we're on Instagram or on Facebook. You can always comment on any post or just send us a message as well. We would love to hear from you all, just what has resonated, anything that has come up, or something that maybe we're missing. Maybe there's a perspective that we're missing that you're
Yep.
like, hey, have you thought about, this, or how about we, you might want to explore or look into this. Please, let us know, because I think we are always open to more dialogue, to more perspectives, and just more conversations around this topic and others. But thank you for listening, for watching. And we will be back with some more episodes in the future. So give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed, follow us, and we will be back with some more perspectives with Lisette and Martina.
Take care, y'all.
Bye.